Hey there, hunters, and welcome back to the Gunners Guild. This is probably going to be my last Palworld video for a while because I've pretty much done everything in the game, and at this point I don't really feel like a need to keep breeding pals because player is the ultimate powerhouse. Well, really, money is. So today I'm going to be discussing the player build, the money build. This is where we're going to be focusing less on the pals and more on the obscene technology that powers us, such as the legendary pump action shotgun and the legendary rocket launcher. Mostly that one, but I do love shotguns. And in case you didn't know, you can obtain the legendary weapon recipes from the World Alpha bosses. The legendary shotgun comes from the Alpha Suzaku in the desert, and you can get the legendary rocket launcher from the Jet Dragon. Jet Dragon? It's a Jet Dragon. Once you have the pattern, you can freely craft any amount of them, and while you might think that you only need one, you could perhaps craft 4, which while it does cost a ton of materials, they do provide 2 actual benefits. The first is that you can shoot and swap to the next gun without having to reload, so shotgun can dump 12 shells, swap, dump 12 shells, rinse and repeat. And I love the shotgun so much, the ammo is dirt cheap too. The rocket launcher can also just shoot, swap, and do that 4 times before you have to go back and start reloading rockets. And rockets are significantly more expensive to craft, but they're well worth the cost. So if you don't have the money for those, you can do shotguns, all that stuff. But a good rocket setup can kill pretty much any boss save Shadowbeak in like 4 rockets or less. And the second reason you might want to grab 4 is because you're actually spreading your durability out between 4 weapons rather than taking one weapon and shooting it 100 times. So you're not going to have to repair them as much. Though eventually you will, and that's going to cost an arm and a leg. But still, I do recommend making 4 if you can spare the weight and the materials. But obviously it's not necessary, that's just for min-maxing purposes. So the other part of this build is your player stats. You're going to want to respec your stats, which you can do from that memory wipe potion that you can craft at your medical bench, because you want to do a high physical attack build. And while 2 attack points per little stat you put into it seems low, you still want high base attack because all the modifiers in your game are modifying base values. So if you're getting a 20% damage bonus and you have just your base 100 attack, you're going to get 20 attack out of it. But if you have 200 attack, you get 40. So you do double your effectiveness of all your boosts. So yeah, try to get at least some attack if you can. You can get some weight or some health or whatever, but you want to get as much attack as you can spare. On a side note, you're also going to want to cook the Mozzarella burger if you can. This burger grants you 20% attack for 10-20 minutes or so. I'm not really sure on the timer, to be honest, but this is the biggest attack boosting food in the game. It's really easy to craft too, as most of the materials like the flour and the milk should be coming from your cake recipe farms anyways. So you just grab a tomato farm, which is really easy, and the mozzarella meat can be easily farmed by either breeding the mozzarella cows, buying them, or just flying around and murdering them. But you're going to want to make a handful of these burgers, because 20% attack is kind of too hard to ignore. And next thing you're going to want is to grab the +2 attack amulets. These boost your attack by 20% each, and yes, they do stack, so you can equip 2. You can get these by doing the dungeons in the Astral Mountains, the big snowy area with level 45 dungeons. I believe this can also drop from the crates in the region as well, but I've gotten 5 from dungeons at this point, so just run around and go through the dungeons a bunch. And yes, finally we do want pals for this team, despite us actually not using them. There are a few good pals that increase player damage, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. The main ones that I'm going to be using for my team are the Gobfin Sharks and the Gobfin Ignis, the red Gobfin. Anyway, these things grant players 10% damage or 20% damage with, max star tier for their passive. And yes, they do stack. You can also use Robin Quills to increase your weak spot damage by 40% at max passive tier, which is still really good. But do note that the Gobfins grant their attack bonus while just in your party, while the Robin Quill does require you to have him out and active to get the bonus. I personally don't like to use the Robin Quills because of that, because I'd rather use the slot to have a pal that converts the player's weapon damage to an element or type damage, so you can actually get type weakness bonus damage on whatever you're hunting. For reference, I do use the Frost Stallion to give the player ice damage, Azure Robe to give the player water damage, Chillette for dragon damage, Hell Zephyr for dark damage, and it flies, Ragnahawk for fire damage, and because it flies, Beacon for electric damage, and it flies, and unfortunately Verdash, which is grass and cannot be mounted, and Anubis for earth, which also can't be mounted. Granted, for the most part, because of the way high level enemies are typically only have used for Azure Robe, Chillette, and Frost Stallion. Having these give your weapons a type damage, so like ice rockets or fire shotgun, grants more damage than a Robin Quill would. Plus, you also then don't have to rely on a weak spot hit to get the advantage of the extra bonus damage. Obviously though, the downside with running an elemental pet is that you have to, match it up to whatever you're fighting and change around constantly. So if you want to use a Robin Quill just to have like a generic, 40% damage, great, go for it. So my team though consists of 4 Gobfins and 1 elemental conversion pal, but we still need to do some breeding. The pal skill Vanguard gives the players 10% increased damage, and yes, this does stack too, so you can have all 5 of your pals with this ability and get 50% more attack. You can also breed Stronghold Strategist for 10% player defense, which is great because, again, this stacks to give your player up to 50% more defense just from the pals in your party. They don't even have to be active, which is a great defensive boost, which does also allow you to put less points into health and then put the rest of your points into attack. But those are the only 2 important skills to have for this setup. Swift and Runner would be great for the mounted pets as well, but for the Gobfins, you really just need these 2 skills. But yes, with all these stacking buffs, the player gets kind of crazy. And again, these are modifiers that are modifying your base damage. But with the 4 Gobfins and Vanguard, that's 120% increased damage. Your elemental pet is going to give you another 10% because of Vanguard, but then also basically double the damage against any enemy weak to it. Plus, I think Frost Stallion and a couple other mounted pets also give the player extra damage too on top of that. Maybe it's just Frost Stallion, but more damage. But then also we have the 2 attack necklaces and a burger, which is another 60% damage. So yeah, the damage really just ramps up pretty flippin' hard. And when you put on a 14,000 damage rocket launcher, shit gets kind of crazy. So with this whole build kind of put together, you could basically walk into any fight and throw 1 or 2 rockets and call it a day. Everything's dead. Shadowbeak takes a few more rockets because it's Shadowbeak, but still, it doesn't take that long to plow through that fight with 8 or 10 rockets. There's really not a whole lot that he or any boss can do to combat the player at this point. So when I started to use this setup to power level my pals, I realized that nothing the pals do is going to come close to how much power the players can get. And it kind of took the wind out of my sails to keep breeding because I just don't feel a need to be making pal teams because nothing is ever going to come close to this nonsense. While I don't think the players need to be nerfed, there's really no point nerfing anything in this game. I would like to see PAL AI be better or PAL skills be better for both players and enemies so that you're actually required to dodge and do stuff properly, or you can keep your pals attacking constantly without the AI getting bogged down or stopping. Because right now I'm just kind of bummed out that the pals aren't really doing much for you besides being stat sticks at this point. But yeah, that's going to be the player build that just spends money to win, truly pay to win build. So it's the best thing around, hands down, and nobody's going to change my mind on that. So I'm going to have to find a less meta way of playing Palworld because this is kind of ruining the experience. Anyway, that's going to be all for me. Thank you all for watching all my Palworld vids and all my content in general. I really do appreciate it. I got to go waste my life in World of Warcraft again, so I'll see y'all in the next Remnant 2 update. But yeah, peace and good luck out there, hunters.